We have John Talbot over here, who's
It's just automatically.
spoke before at the Winter Star Party a couple of times. He's the retired from the Air Force with the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron of the Hurricane Hunters. He's got 5,600 flying hours and 153 hurricane penetrations. He's the main project manager in the development of the step frequency microwave radiometer. And John also tells me to get out of Florida when Irma came, but I stayed there. So anyways, I think most of you know John, and I'll go ahead and let him start his workshop.
All right, great. Thanks, Tim. Anyways, welcome everybody. I'm going to get a few administrative notes kind of out of the way first before we start. Like I just mentioned, if you don't have the latest version of PixInsight and you have your laptop here, Richard Wright has the latest installer and he's running around with his hand up there. If you don't know Richard, he's the engineer of software at BISC, a good friend of mine, and he's going to kind of go around, and if you get stuck when we do something during our processing phase, he will be able to help you. So maybe just raise your hand or something. This is a 3-day workshop, and it's 3 hours each day from 10 to 1. So luckily we didn't have to stay up really late last night, so it's easy to show up this morning. I think maybe tomorrow morning will be easy to be here, but maybe a little rough on Thursday morning. So anyways, the idea here is everybody's got this folder that I handed out. There's some data on there, and we're going to start from scratch, go over PixInsight in depth from the beginning to the end. In the end, we're going to produce an image that looks sort of like, hopefully, what you see on the screen here. This is the data set. It's the Flame Nebula, Icc 410, Icc 405 area. And I took this back in November from home. So we're going to go through that and put together a color image. We're probably, I guess we'll probably have like every hour, you know, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom after all this coffee here soon. So we'll have like a little 10-minute break so you guys can run out, we'll come back. If you need power for your laptop, there's several extension cords around with like 3 outlets on them. So, you know, mine will only last an hour if I don't plug it in. So once we start cranking and using that processor to do some stuff, it's going to probably drain down your batteries. So anyways, find one of those. If you have a question, I'm going to kind of, even though we're going to be here for like 9 hours, this is 9 hours worth of stuff, because I'm assuming, just to raise a hand, who in here is like, this is the first time you've ever used the program? So yeah. And I know we have some experienced users in here too, and you may be bored a little bit, but we're going to go through from beginning to end, kind of what PixInsight's all about and stuff. So there'll be opportunities, but I don't want to get bogged down because it will really slow us down. So if you really have a question, you don't need Richard's help, you know, throw your hand up and I'll get to a spot where I'll just stop and we can kind of keep it as short as possible. That probably help us out. So anyways, give you a little background on this this data set here. I took this from home in November. It includes about 40 hours worth of data. Luckily I had some really, really nice weather during shoot from the end of September through just about early December. I used a 70mm refractor to this with a QSI 583 camera. It's one of the original older QSIs, but anyways, it's a really nice camera. It's roughly about 3.3 arc seconds per pixel, and my focal length's 338mm. So this was taken all unguided. I'll throw a little plug in there for my Mighty. I've got a little Paramount Mighty. And at that focal length, yeah, I can shoot 20 minutes unguided. And some of the H8 data, that's what I did. So hopefully this is kind of what we'll end up with, and we'll go from there. Oh, there's a text file within that folder, and it should be plain text. if you can't open it, I've got we're going to need some information off it, a few pieces of data to plug into some of the modules here when we get to it. So it should be just TXT. So if you don't have it or can't open it, don't worry about it. It'll work. But it also kind of has a little outline of what I was going to talk about. So yeah. Okay. Well, let me get this closed. So anyways, luckily I've had the opportunity to use PixInsight since they first came out with the LE version, which was called the light version in 2005-ish time frame. And it's software developed by a bunch of astronomers, amateurs, and so forth from over in Spain. And it's kind of a collaboration of work. A lot of the modules are open source, so people can write their own scripts for it and their own modules. And the software has really been developed nicely over the last 10 years to the product we have today, which is version 1.8.5, I think, something like that. And it's really becoming very popular. It kind of had a slow start, but it's really been moving along over the last 4 or 5 years. It's kind of hard to use in the sense, and a lot of the complaints I hear from people is there isn't a really good help system with it. And that's kind of true. There is quite a bit of help, and they keep adding more and more, but it is kind of a complicated program. It's similar to Photoshop. If you guys have used Photoshop, at least when you first learned it or tried to learn it, it takes a while. I know it took me about 5 years just to really kind of get what I thought was a good understanding of Photoshop. And it took me probably 5 years to get a good understanding of this. So it's going to take you a while. All I can do is tell you the more you practice with it, the better it'll be. And you've got at least one data set to play with. Hopefully you'll spend some time with it because it does do some amazing things. The reason why I first started using it is because I had a lot of light pollution in my backyard, and I image from home unless I come to an event like this, and I try to do something like this once a quarter or so. But when I was working, I didn't really. I had what I had in my backyard. So these guys really were the first. It was really the first astronomical imaging software program that was developed from the ground up with a way to remove gradients. And it basically saved my life at home. And that's why I was able to, I jumped all over it because I tried everything. I tried, Photoshop, Maxim, CCD Stack, all the popular programs out there. And most of them have some sort of way to remove gradients, but PixInsight has a really, really cool way, and it really works well. Guys like world-class imagers like Adam Block, he uses PixInsight now. I didn't bring the book with me, but if you don't have Warren Keller's book, it's called Inside PixInsight, and you're really interested in using this software, you should probably get it because it is a fantastic book for the beginner. It goes through everything that's in the program. It is changing, nothing stays static forever, so Warren, puts out updates and things to different modules that he's written about. But it's a fantastic book. So I read through it, and even though I've been using the program for 10 years now, I still learned some things that I didn't know. So I would highly recommend it. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to go through the menu system here, how the program is set up. Whether or not you're using Windows or Mac, it's fairly similar. This is standard under the file menu that you would typically have for a regular program where you can open up images, open up recent images. Here you'll see I've got a whole bunch of recent ones, and I just have to click on one of those and it should open. A really cool feature that we're going to use during this class is this project module. This allows you to work on data when you're done, like for the day today, when we leave, we're going to save a project file out. When you reopen that tomorrow, it'll be right where you left off with everything that you did and all the history of every process that you went through with PixInsight. And they're called project files. And they're under this first menu here. We're going to use this load project and save project. I've got a project on that folder, and we'll use that to load it. And of course, there's if you have an image open, this is where you can read the FITS header of that image, the underlying data that's written to the file when it downloads from your camera. Under the edit menu here, there's some interesting things here. This global preferences module. I normally leave most of this stuff at default, but you can change some interesting things in here. How the program operates, how many cores it uses on your computer. Most of you probably have a much faster machine than I do. This is a 2009 MacBook Pro, and it's a dual core processor. So when we start doing some things on here, it's going to take mine a little bit to update to do stuff, and you may be done, but just bear with me. The whole idea is to have you see it in action and do its stuff. So there's some stuff, at some other time you can go through this and take a look. There's some neat stuff in here that you can change. My recommendation, however, is if you don't have to change it, just leave it as just leave the defaults the way they are, because it does work pretty good. Okay, readout options. There's another menu item called readout options. PixInsight doesn't display data like you're probably familiar with, especially in the 16-bit space from 0 to 65, 535, what we would call ADU, analog digital units. Some programs call it DN, digital number, and PixInsight does that. You can display data, but internally it rescales all data on a scale from 0 to 1. So how you decide to display your information on the screen, well, back up. This gives you the option to change how you do that, and it's right here. So PixInsight data is normalized, but if I want to, I can make it 5, 6, 8 decimal points. You can make it as high resolution as you want. If you want to show it in the typical 16-bit, 0 to 65, 535, you can there. What you have to do, though, if you select that, and this is similar on most of the PixInsight modules, there's a little blue button down here. That applies that change globally to the program. So that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to click there, and then all your data will show up in that range that you're kind of used to seeing. But internally, it's not using that. It's using the normalized information. There's some other neat things you can change here. Your probe size, so like the mouse probe, and it's the same as in most programs, like even Photoshop has this. You can select a single pixel or up to 15 by 15 pixels. I normally use 5 by 5. It seems to be a good average for me. It works pretty well. When you're trying to probe around your image, looking at background values, it gives you an average value of the surrounding 5 pixels. Actually, more than 5. It's 5 by 5. You're probably quicker to do 25? Yeah, 25
square pixel.
It allows you to change the color space here, but I always leave this at default. It's got a whole bunch of different color spaces, but again, I just leave that at default. And it gives you an idea of how your zooms are going to look. The default zoom factor, I just leave that as default. So I'm going to stick this back to the 0 to 1 data range. Just hit apply there. So that's where you do that.
Did you save that globally?
Yes. Yes.
Blue button?
Yeah, you always, here you have to select a little blue button, and that applies that globally to everything within this piece of software.
The only change is 5 by 5.
Yeah. The other important thing under the edit menu is the color management setup. And this is very similar to most programs that are color aware and color managed. In my case, I typically calibrate my monitors. I have a i1 something.
i1 Pro.
i1 Pro. And it's a puck that goes on my screen, and it allows me to calibrate the colors on the screen. Photoshop has this capability. It's very useful. Most color aware software does. Anyways, that's my profile from when I calibrated it up there. I'm not sure what's going to show up on your screen. It may be what's defaulted within your operating system, but that's where you would change that if you wanted to. On the rendering intent, typically I have perceptual selected. There's most of the same things that other software has. There's relative colorimetric, same as Photoshop. Absolute colorimetric, I think Photoshop has that also, but it's very similar. So I leave it at perceptual. This is my default color profile here. If you want to select a grayscale default profile, you can do that here, and you can select these down buttons. It'll show you what's available on your computer. Your proofing profile, and then this thing called proofing intent. And if you notice, when I put my mouse up there, it throws up a little help window. Throughout PixInsight, that typically happens when you have a process you're working on and stuff. It'll explain what that does, or how maybe to refine the settings and so forth, or give you hints on maybe what you should select. I use relative colorimetric, and make sure that this little checkbox is checked. Enable color management, you want that on. And you also typically are going to want to embed Icc Profiles and RGB images, because when you finally save an image like a JPEG and you want to send it out to the world and all your friends, it's going to read that profile and should probably show up in the correct colors on their monitor. Or say you put it on your website, other people are going to see it the way you intended it to be seen, typically, if you have an Icc profile. So that's important there. And that's probably default checked anyways, but just make sure it is. And if you changed anything here, make sure you hit the little blue button. Let's see here. Okay. Under the view menu, there's some interesting things. There's this thing called script editor, which unless you are good at editing JavaScript, I would probably not mess with it. It's also available over here on the side. You can do real-time previews here, create them. You can decide what toolbars that you want selected up on top. You can put PixInsight into full screen mode, which is typically the way I like it, or full desktop mode. If I click there, it's full desktop. If I go full screen, and that's the way I normally use it, because I can see, for some reason on my Mac, I can't see this bottom bar, which has information in it. But if I just stick my mouse up there, it's just a drop-down window, so I get the full access to that bar. So that's just normally how I run it. How you do it is going to be up to you. Over under the image toolbar or drop-down, this is where you can select different options for images, depending, if you have one open on the screen. Color management to display images of different color spaces, transparency, stuff like that. You just have to play around with it, and you'll finally get the hang of what that does. Under preview, we're going to make a lot of use of previews on a lot of images, and you can make them here, and there's shortcuts also. Just right-click on your mouse, and if we had an image open, it would be, there's a way to create a preview right here just on a shortcut. Masks, if you're familiar with doing some processing in Photoshop, you probably have used masks before. PixInsight has a detailed masking system. It's a little bit harder to understand how we use it, but we'll go through some of those. And we'll build some masks. And backing up to when I was trying to learn this, the biggest issue I had was creating masks, because I always did it in Photoshop and it was different. And once I learned how to create masks, all of a sudden things opened up for me. My eyes got wide open. It's like, oh, okay, this is a really easy way. So if a light bulb doesn't go on over the next couple days, the more you play with it, it's eventually going to go on. And it's very important that you understand how to make star masks. And we're going to do some of those, because some of the functions require star masks, because you don't want to do things to your stars, you want to do things sometimes to the underlying data. and keep your stars the way they, the way they are. So, anyways, we're going to do a lot about masking. Okay, so over on the side here, there's a tab called Process Explorer. Also up here, there's a drop down that lists all the processes within PixInsight. Same stuff that's over here. It's just, however you want to get to it. We're going to use quite a few of these here. But PixInsight has a whole bunch of processes that it does that you can take advantage of, and they're all right here. There's also a thing called a process icon. There's one that's in your folder there that we're going to load during the class, and the process icon load module is going to be down here. So we're going to select this, and then we're going to have to tell it where to go get that process icon in that folder. But process icons are it's almost I guess the easiest way to explain this is some of these modules have settings that you can set up, and you can, like dynamic background extraction, which is the gradient removal routine. You can create on your image a whole bunch of points where it's going to extract the background to create what your light gradient looks like. You can create a process icon from that, and stick it on your screen, and you can apply that to the rest of your images. You can save it. Next time you come back in, it's the way you set it up. It's already there. You don't have to go through all the work. So process icons are very valuable, in saving time. And if you didn't remember what you did with the image, if you saved the icon out, it's all right there. It's also available under the history. PixInsight keeps a history of everything that you do. You can always go back into that history and click on that module and see what values you had put in there to do whatever you were doing. It's really, really good at that. And that's I think one of the best features. That's down here on the side. It's kind of hidden on my screen here. But it's right over here in the bottom left-hand corner. You can click here and select an image. There's nothing open right now, but it'll show you everything that you did to that image. So I think that's kind of cool. Okay, scripts. Under the script menu is a bunch of pre-loaded scripts, some developed by the original developers, some developed by really smart individuals out there that know how to write code in JavaScript. And they've created some wonderful modules here. Everything from batch processing, and we're going to use this to calibrate some images, to not deconvolution. Under utilities here, a whole bunch of things like color mask script, enhancement scripts. Actually, a deconvolution preview script is under here. We're going to use this Narrowband RGB combined script. We're going to add in H-alpha data into our RGB data. It does a wonderful job. There's a whole bunch of neat scripts here. Noise reduction has this thing called Mure Denoise, which is a script that we're going to use to get rid of some of the graininess of our image. So there's a whole bunch of cool stuff in here. You can calculate your sky limited background. You can calculate some basic parameters from your camera using some of these scripts, using this basic CCD parameter script. But anyways, this is where all the scripts are located. There's other ways to get to them. However, I think the easiest thing is just remember you're just going to go up here to scripts. PixInsight has 4 different workspaces, and you can have different things in different workspaces. You could have 3 different images you're working on in separate workspaces, which is kind of cool. I normally, it probably takes quite a bit of memory to do that. I normally don't use that function. I have in the past, but this is how you get to them. Right here, these little squares at the bottom. But you can also do it up here, select workspace. Right now we're on just workspace 1. Under window, there's a few little things that are neat. You can capture a screenshot of what's on your screen. If you have an image up or icons up, you can you can load them from here or do some other things to them. And then under resources, this is where you can go to the PixInsight forum, your website, updates, and so forth. There's some online tutorials out there. If you haven't gone to the PixInsight website yet or the forum, I recommend you do. The forum is has a lot of smart individuals on it, and they have a bunch of tutorials that you can access through the forum, and view at your own convenience. There is, I think this is a YouTube PixInsight page which has some cool videos. So, anyways, that's just a outline of what's up there on top. So, anybody got any questions about that before we go on?
Just one. You noticed there were pop-ups that were explaining what it was. How do I read that pop-up?
It's hover your mouse over it, it'll just pop it up. Yeah. Now, if you have a Mac, sometimes the full text for some reason does not display. On my Windows computer, it works. It displays just fine. So I'm not sure what it is with the Mac that doesn't work too hot sometimes.
You
But
hover another Windows.
yeah, you just hover your mouse over there and it should just pop up. Yeah, if there's no pop-up, then there isn't anything. If there is, it should just pop up. All right. Okay, so, all right, so the first thing I figured we'd do is go through what's in this file here. So if you open up that folder, should be WSP PixInsight here. There's several folders underneath that. This is a process icon here called Cosmetic Correction, and we're going to utilize that when we calibrate some images. I didn't put the original data set on here of all the data because we're talking, this data was all taken, it was 42 gigabytes worth of stuff. So, but I gave you guys a subset of some raw information that we'll put into the batch processing script to calibrate and so forth. And that stuff's going to be under data here.
How do you get out of the full screen?
Well, on my Mac, let's see here.
Would you arrow to the top?
I just go up to the top and I've got a little button here which is, I think Windows should be the same way.
Except it's on the other side.
Yeah, or it's on this side, yeah. So anyways, this data in here is the raw data that we're going to open calibrate, and this is some HA data. There's a bunch of it here, some luminance and some reds. And you should also have, let's see, under the flats here, let's see, there should be a folder. Okay, here, the master folder, I'm sorry. This is where the master flat, I gave you stacked flats already. And I gave you a master bias and a master dark. And you can create them with this script and so forth and then save them out, and that's sort of what I did here. So what I first want you to do is I want you to go to under script, batch processing, and then this thing called batch pre-processing. And but actually, let me back up. Sorry. What I first want you to do is go into process icons here, and hit load process icons. Okay. And then I want you to go to that folder. On the Mac, I just go desktop, and I go here. I want you to go to your folder, and you may just have to go to your desktop, but I want you to open up this Cosmetic Correction icon. Cosmetic Core, XPSM. Okay. If you just double click it, okay.
We're good. Which folder is that in, John?
Okay, so, sorry?
It's underneath the root folder. Right underneath the root?
Yeah, it's underneath the,
Cosmetic correction.
yes. So I just want you to open that up, and if it doesn't show up on your screen, because I created this with a big monitor, sometimes it doesn't resize right, but what you can do is under Window here, go arrange icons, and it'll bring everything into view. And you should have this little bar here on the side, which is movable. It's a place where you can put your icons and stuff and keep them away from your image area if you want to. Does everybody see the Cosmetic Correction little icon show up there on your screen within PixInsight? Anybody not see it? No, you, okay, close that, just close that window. Go to process, up. And go to the root folder where you're saving your data. No, where the folder I gave you on the stick.
It's on the desktop.
Okay, so can you go to your desktop? And then there, did you put it there? All right, so this in the calibration module of PixInsight, part of, and this is well explained in Warren's book if you have his book, there's a function called Cosmetic Correction. When you calibrate images using darks and biases and so forth, not all the bad stuff goes away. You're still sometimes left with hot pixels. You're still sometimes left with just stuff in your image that you want to get rid of. And this is how you get rid of it. This is a module that will, after your images are calibrated, it'll automatically look at that image, and it will, based on a standard deviation that you select, it'll automatically look at pixel by pixel and say, that pixel doesn't look like anything like the surrounding ones around it. That must be bad, and it'll get rid of it. And it'll correct your images for all the bad stuff. It's similar to, there's a way in CCD Stack, if you're familiar with that, to get rid of hot pixels and cold pixels. This is what this does. And if you double click this icon here, it's going to open up a window which is the main screen on how you set this process icon up. Okay? It's the easiest way for me to say that. This is available over here on the under the Process Explorer where all your processes are listed, but I gave you a pre-saved icon, and all it is I have selected here, get rid of the hot and cold pixels, and it uses this standard deviation of 3.0. If you're familiar with what a typical standard deviation, like a Gaussian curve, looks like, anything outside of 3 standard deviations, it gets rid of. It says, hey, it's bad. And this is the default, and it works excellent. It works really, really well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff extra that you can do here, but that's for another day and another time. I just wanted to show you, you can double click this and it'll open up how the window is set up, and you'll see these 2 check boxes here checked. And this is how we're going to get rid of, this icon is going to take care of cleaning up our image. And I will tell you up front here that in order to use this within the batch pre-processing script, you have to open this first, which is why I asked you to open it up. If you don't have it open, you can't select it on the script. So if you see this here, come up here to your scripts, batch pre-processing, and click on the batch pre-processing script. And it's going to open up a window that looks like this. All right.
John,
on the XLR corner.
You talking about which button you talking about? Oh well, yeah. Well, that's under that cosmetic correction script, yeah. But they're all like that. All of the scripts. Yeah. They'll be on the yeah.
why can't you use cosmetic correction within the batch preprocessing window? There's a checkbox for it.
There is, but you have to have it open before you can select it. You have to have that open. For some reason, the guys who developed the software, if you don't have the icon already open, you can't select it here, because when you hit apply here under Cosmetic Correction, it gives you a drop-down window, and I guess it goes to what's open on your screen already. Why? I don't know. I'm just telling you up front, that's what you have to do. So anyways, this script is the script that you use to calibrate all your stuff. And you can go from, this is where you're going to load all the bias frames, the dark frames, the raw data, and you're going to hit go, and it's going to just, it's going to do its thing. And you can actually go as far as selecting the image you want it to align all the other images to, and it'll automatically stack them all for you in a one-button push. And if any of you were at Dr. Ron Brecher's class last year, that's what he does with a lot of his stuff. He just puts it all in there, hits go. I personally don't do it that way, and I'm going to show you kind of the way I do it. But if you're in Ron's class and you want to do it that way, that's perfectly okay. It's sort of up to you. So anyways, we're going to load our bias frames up here. So you come over here to the left side where the bias tab is, just click there. And then at the bottom there's a button called Add Bias. So you're going to click that, and if it doesn't take you to that folder that I gave you that you downloaded, you need to go to there. You need to have that show up. You need to select it. Like here, I could go to my desktop and select it. But you're going to want to click on the Master Dark, Master Flat folder and select that bias frame. This is a master bias. If you had raw bias frames and you hadn't stacked them yet, you could just load them all in there. But in this case, we have a master one, so we're going to select that, and it shows up in here. Okay?
I'm getting an error.
Select the master bias frame.
Okay, not a monolithic XIS file. Error.
Monolithic XISF file.
I'm getting that too.
Do you have the latest PixInsight update? Huh, that's weird.
Works for me.
Actually, there's two bias files.
Let me close this and do it.
One there and one there.
Well, the only way you can open it.
Okay, that's why we're getting the error.
Yeah, apparently
Oh, down here, okay.
the bias frame. The one that's
Instead of up here.
Yeah, it's at the bottom.
Yeah, apparently on Windows, it'll give you a dot file. Mac doesn't do that, but I think it's, I'm not sure what
Did you
that file
process it on the Mac? That's probably why it's there.
Yes, this
That might be
was
what it is.
created on a Mac, so that's probably
So that's why
why
it's
you
there.
see it. But it's not that dot file, it's the one that is.
It's the one second from the bottom.
Yeah.
The one that doesn't have the date.
Oh, you won't see that there, but on
I-
ours you'll see it.
Yeah, so it's this, it says, it should have a little QSI icon, I mean, not QSI, a
Well, you can
PixInsight
tell.
icon.
You can tell it's only 4 kilobytes.
Yeah.
That file.
So this is a 100 megabyte file.
What folder is that under, your master dark?
It's under the folder that says Master Darks Bias, I mean Master Flats Darks.
Let's open the folder.
Just click on that folder.
Stupid for a moment.
Double click. And come down here.
Is everybody with them?
Right here. Click on it. Hit open.
All right, I'll let Tim or Richard help you if you can't find it. But anyways, that's where that is. So once you see it up here, remember I said this is a master bias, so this has already been stacked. So over here on the side, there are a couple little boxes. Use master bias. So you're going to want to click there. While you're at it, click Use Master Dark and Use Master Flat. Because these are masters that have already been stacked, that's how you tell the program that that's the case. If you just had 40 or 50 bias frames that were raw, 20 darks or 20 flats, you could just grab all of them, load them all in, and you wouldn't have that checkbox selected, and it knows it's going to calibrate them, stack them for you, and create the master. In this case, you already have it. So you have to have all these 3 checkboxes checked. After that, go to your Dark tab, go down to Add Darks. It should take you right back to that same folder, and select the file here, QSI Dark Being 1. The way I name my files, this is 1200 second dark, minus 15 centigrade. It was taken, that was the temperature of the camera. And I did this in October, so last October. So double click that, and it should show up in here. And if you notice, PixInsight's smart enough to read the fits header, and it'll sort things like your 1x1 frames, your 2x2 frames. In this case, it knows that this is a 1200 second long dark, so it read the fits file there. All right. Go to your flat tab, add flats, and here what I want you to do is I want you to select all of them. Usually, I think Mac or Windows are the same way. I select this, I hit Shift, I select there, all of them, I hit Open, and it's going to load them all in. And it's going to know what flat it is, whether it's a luminance, a red, a green, or blue. In this case, we have HA in there also. So it sorts them for you. All right.
This says 5 or 7 flats.
All right, so those are your flats. And then do the same thing for your lights. Go to the light tab here and add lights. And this is your this is your exposures. They're going to be under data.
Select all the files.
Yeah, just select all of those. There's reds, there's luminance, and there's HA. Just select all of them and hit Open. And it's going to throw them in the window, and it's going to sort them. And it's going to show you, these are your luminance, these are your HA, these are your reds. Right?
Going a little too fast.
Okay, well, we'll slow down right here and let you catch up.
Excuse me, I noticed that you can, if you have the correct tab, you can just look at all files.
Yes, you can do that too. You can just click, Add Files. It's going to read it, know these are dark. These are flat. As long as it's written to the fit center of the file. I use the SkyX camera add-on and it lights in there. This is a flat, this is a light. There's multiple ways to do it.
Okay. You're using it as a DSLR push.
As long as it's written into the file.
Oh, really?
If you don't have
I can do it all.
They got HA, luminance, and red?
Yep, only HA, luminance, and red. You should see in there. Yeah, I just gave you a little subset of the data, just so you can manually go through this process. Because there was a lot of data. Hopefully you can collect some data over the next couple nights. Play with it yourself, I'll tell you. Anybody still stuck on loading these things up? Are we all good?
So, John,
Yeah.
when you bring up your screen, you got the calibration applied checks already there. When I bring up mine, they're never checked, so you just manually check them?
I'm going to go through stuff.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so if your data's in there, there's a couple other things here on the script that I typically use. One is we're going to want to, I typically select this box here, calibrate only. Because if you don't have that selected, it gives you the option of, you can register your images and you can stack them also. So that's how you do that. If you uncheck that, it allows you to select, registration parameters from your image on how you want to register them. But we're going to go through that in the registration module itself, just to show you how the module works. But that's an option here also.
Yeah, mine is grayed out under image registration.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have calibrate only check, that's one. You want to check calibrate only.
So in this case here, I want you to select calibrate only. and I want you to select the Cosmetic Correction box just below it. And then on the drop-down tab, you're going to select that Cosmetic Core file, which is already open up here. And it goes to the window and it says, it looks to see what's open.
What's there?
What's there, and that's where you select it, okay? All right. Over here on the right-hand side, under Global Options, if you had a DSLR image, so you have a Bayer matrix image, you have to select this thing called CFA images. So that's how the PixInsight will say, oh, this is a color image, with a Bayer matrix, and it'll do some different things when it calibrates it. But I don't have that checked because these are monochrome. Usually I leave this up bottom fits. This is all the defaults. I think it selects this as default. This probably not. Make sure these are checked. I always select optimize dark frames because what it'll do is it'll look at the image and it'll look at the noise in the image and it'll optimize the dark frame to get rid of as much noise. Just because this dark frame happens to be 1200 seconds long, was taken at minus 15 degrees, I could calibrate some images that were taken at minus 20 or minus 10. The developers of the program will tell you that is not that critical, okay? The way I grew up, it was critical. So I was always a little skeptical about that. But the way that optimized dark frame algorithm works is it looks at the noise in the image and it tries to get rid of as much of the noise as possible. So it does some funky behind the scenes stuff. I just always leave it checked. And then make sure these three are checked here.
I'm going to throw a curveball like that because it won't work if you use RBI mitigation on a camera.
Could be
like
true.
that,
I've never
on
used
that.
RBI, so I wouldn't know that. But good point. But anyways, if the easiest thing is I calibrate all my images I took at minus 15 with minus 15 darks. I also take my biases at the same temperature. And I've got darks and biases from minus 5 to minus 20. You know, I just make a library of them. So that's the easiest way around that. Okay, so we got those selected. Under your, it gives you some options if you have raw biases that aren't stacked here. It'll allows you to stack them in different ways. I leave that as default. Whenever I load raw frames in there, I don't even mess with that. But I will tell you that if you don't have enough of them and you're using the default values, it'll pop up a window. It'll say, hey, you're using Winsorized Sigma clipping to combine these and you've only got 6 images. Maybe you need at least this many. You should use this instead. So it'll pop up a little window, and here it pops up the little window. It shows you the different combine algorithms and how many images you need and so forth to do that. Under your dark tab, there's this optimization threshold. I leave that as default. Hopefully yours has something in there. If it doesn't, these are the default values. But you can change them if you want. And again, it'll allow you, if you have raw frames, different ways to stack those and different ways to reject data from those and so forth. My suggestion is just leave the default in there. Take 20 darks, take at least double the bias that you have for dark. So if you have 20 darks, take 40 bias frames. They are easy to do. Anyway, so there is some stuff in here that you can change. They're under your flats, the same thing. It allows you to optimize how you want to stack them if you want to go that route. And then under the lights, it gives you, under the Cosmetic Correction, if you have a color camera, you can select a way you want to debayer that data. All the times I've ever done it, VNG is my favorite, but there are other options available. We're not going to get into drizzle However, if you're familiar with the drizzle algorithm, it's built into PixInsight, and if you shoot data that's undersampled, that's a typical good option to use. It'll double size your files. So to give you an example, I'm going to shoot 2x2 images here because we only had a couple nights. I want to get as much as I can. I'm going to drizzle that data. It's going to create a file that is like a 1x1 image, and it's hopefully going to, if I have enough dither data, it's going to increase the resolution of that data. But that's how you do it in PixInsight. It's drizzle. We're not going to get into that. It's a little bit complicated on how you do it. However, there's lots of help information on the forum about that.
Is the drizzle default checked?
No, it shouldn't be. No.
Mine is.
Uncheck it.
It's
Well, you have, it's
So-
grayed out because you have calibrate only on.
Yeah, you should have calibrate only
So
on it. All this
if you
stuff should be
uncheck,
grayed out.
if you uncheck calibrate only, it should,
Yeah, it gives you the
it'll
option.
come on, so keep calibrate only, it turns off automatically.
All right.
Image integration.
Yeah. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, we're not going to worry about this box here where it says registration reference image, because what this is for is if you have an image that you want to register all your other images to, and you want to do it within the script, that's where you go select the image. You just select the drop down and say, I want to use my luminance as my base image, and I'm going to align everything to that image. But we're going to leave that blank. But what we are going to do is we're going to select the output directory. This is where it's going to put all our calibrated files. So in this case, I'm just going to select the base folder that you should have on your computer already, WSP folder. And I'm going to select open here, and it's going to put that folder down here. So it's going to know where to put all these files, because it's going to create.
So you're going to put it in the root directory.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the root. Yeah. I normally do that even at home with my base images. If I've got, my 100 subs in there, it's going to create some folders for me. One's going to be called, I think, master. If you have darks and biases, it's going to create a folder with your stacked images. It's going to do some cool stuff. So anyways, make sure that's selected.
where did you go up on top to get that?
Okay, so I went over here, I clicked this drop down, and I went to the main root folder that you have on your desktop that I gave you, called this. And then once I have it here, I just hit open. Like I could go to this folder, double click on it. I could go to any folder I wanted to put the information. It's going to be easier if we just stick it in here
In the root,
to
in
get
the
at
root
it.
directory.
It's just the root directory. Yeah. And select open. And it's going to put that down in there. Got that, Mark? Okay. All right. Everybody good?
Doesn't need to be entered or anything.
As long as it shows up there, that's where it's
Just
going to put all your stuff.
WSP _ PixInsight and you're okay.
All right. So, the next thing I want you to do is hit Diagnostics. If something in there is not correct, it'll come up and give you
What's wrong?
what's wrong. In this case, it says we're okay. So, if you want an example of that, is if say all you did was you took a bunch of bias frames, a bunch of darks, and a bunch of flats, and you just want to create masters, but you don't have any data yet. So the lights window here is blank, right? There's nothing in here. And I hit Diagnostics, it's going to say, hey, you didn't select any light frames. That's okay. You can still run it, and all it'll do is create your master darks, your master bias, and your master flats.
What if it says your information is no good?
You're screwed.
You're
It
screwed at that
says
point.
info's nil.
Huh?
Yeah, it's a different error message. It's a error,
That's interesting.
yeah. Maybe
All right, where's my help?
Windows are different.
Oh, he's in the back.
No.
Yeah, info is null.
Wait, hold on, what did it say? Go back?
It says info is null. Yeah, we got it all wrong.
Okay. Is it okay?
Yes.
Is it okay?
All right, let's go review your bias. Your bias. Okay, that's good. So dark. Good. Okay, neck, relax. Mill, there, lights. Another light down there. Then you have calibrate
Go to Diagnostics.
Well, let's just, we'll see if it's gonna work.
Now it says it's okay.
Now it's fine.
Okay, all right. Well,
That's because we walked over there.
That's because it's computers, man.
all right, so if everybody's at this point, I need to load my lights back in here because I wanted to show you something and I got rid of them. So what you're gonna do is hit run, okay? And it's gonna go through there and it's gonna calibrate all your images and it's gonna output them to a folder. Right, yours will, computer will probably work a lot faster than mine. Because,
I was running into 2 old Macs.
the last time I did a class like this here at Chiefland for the Fall Star Party a few years ago, I'd have people in the back saying, yeah, mine was done 5 minutes ago, and I'm still cranking along. So what it's doing is it's taking each image, it's calibrating that image with the master dart and applying the flat to it, and it's outputting that data to a file, to a folder. If you had raw biases and raw darks, it'll create a folder called master, and under there are your master stacks. So if you wanted to save that for use later on, next month, you could pull those master files out of there and save them somewhere else on your computer too, as your, if you have a special directory where you like to keep your master darks or master biases. The other cool thing about PixInsight is it shows you as it's doing what it's doing. That's that processing window called the process console, and you can always go back and look at that. If you want to review what it did to something, you can always go back and it's in plain text there. It's kind of cool.
This is the process that kill the batteries.
Yeah, this is the. Yeah. All right, so some cool stuff showing up here. So here, it's showing you what the optimization thresholds were when it used that dark frame optimization. It reads the noise in the image and it tells you what that noise is. When it corrects the file using Cosmetic Correction, it'll tell you how many pixels it corrected. And we can always go back and re-look at that after, and we'll do that just to show you where it's at. All right, mine should be done in just a second here.
So am I reading that right? It's reading 61 fits header words and writing 84, so it's adding to the fits header.
Yeah, it writes its own information into the fits because what PixInsight uses that information, it writes what the noise estimate in the image is. So when you do noise reduction, it knows what the base noise level is in the image. It writes all kinds of things. What you will find, however, sometimes if you look at a PixInsight processed file, the fits information in there is not the same stuff that came when you downloaded it from your camera. Like when you download a file from your camera automatically, when you're imaging, it'll write things like, your latitude, longitude, your RA, your depth, your, all kinds of information about that file. PixInsight dumps most of that. It writes its own stuff to it. So you have to open up the original image uncalibrated if you really want to go back and look at that stuff. Okay, so now it's doing this cosmetic correction right now on this one. See here, it corrected 524 pixels on this image. And then it wrote it out. Looks like it's working on this one. So on that one, 432. I've had some images where it corrects 10,000 pixels. Some of it depends on the size of your image, size of your chip, how many pixels you have, and so forth. This is an 8 megapixel camera. It's an 8300 chip.
John?
Yeah.
So as long as you have cosmetic correction open as a process on the side, when you calibrate only, it will automatically cosmetically correct.
If you select within the batch pre-processing
have to
script,
select the
you have to select the checkbox
Oh, and
to
then
apply
you-
cosmetic correction, and then you tell it what, this is the file right here.
Got it.
Just remember to have it open, because it took me forever. I'm like, why won't I can't find it, where is it? You have to have it already open on the screen. Yeah, so. Okay, am I the only one that's not done?
Oh, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not too far behind.
Well, I was done 5 minutes ago.
Probably. Yeah, I do most of my, at a start party, I use this computer to do most of my processing, and it's extremely slow. But at home, I've got a iMac, which has got the Skylake processor in it, and it'll be done in 15 seconds compared to this. So if you have a quad core system, it usually runs pretty quick. And PixInsight knows, and it optimizes itself to use as many threads as possible. My stuff at home uses like 32 threads when it's running. This one uses like 3.
Okay, John. So it's 11 o'clock while we wait for you to catch up.
Oh, yeah, so it is a bathroom break. Okay. Yeah, why don't we take a, since I'm still going here, if you need to take a, let's take a 10-minute, and we'll come back and we'll look at, we'll go on, look at the table. Thank you, Denise. I didn't get my watch. I got it. My 10-year-old